Okay, hello everybody. Welcome back to What's New and Coming Up with Lipedema. We have some well-known faces and some newer faces this time around, which I'm very excited about. So we have Catherine Seo, myself, and Tamara Carroll. Everybody say hi. Catherine, you can start.
Oh, hi. I'm not one of the newer faces. And I'm wonderful to be here with you today and to welcome Tamara. Tamara's been doing our weekly, or now it's bi-weekly podcasts. So Tamara, tell everyone what you've been doing. We love having you with us.
Well, thank you for the invite. And it's always such an honor to come and hang out with y'all. My podcast is called Life with Lipedema, Loved, Valued, and Treasured. And I have a little, what do you call it? Like a blog just about, it's called Beautifully Curved. And so my mission is to just help women to really love and appreciate their bodies, love and appreciate who we are on the inside as well as the outside, and to show up in the world with confidence, even with the disease that we are struggling with, and just to show up, in the world and maybe change some mindsets. And so in this next year, I'm going to be very intentional with the podcast. It's on Wednesday evenings at 6 p.m. EST, and it's on the second and fourth Wednesday evening of the month, and bringing in different people. As a matter of fact, Siobhan is my next guest on the 22nd coming up, and using a word of the year and using different themes for each month. And so just bringing in different people that I know and different connections that I've made and some of the tribe members, and just being able to share and get to know each other and encourage each other.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I am Siobhan. I'm the research specialist on the team, so I read a whole bunch of stuff and I watch videos and presentations and go to congresses and conferences, and then I come back and share what I've learned. My phone is ringing, so I have to silence it. Sometimes I don't answer my phone.
That's most of the time with me. It's for caller ID, right?
Yes, well, very true.
I have an announcement or two, so I'm going to start off with that. Not with the YouTube thing, but with Nina, because I think what Tamara talked about fits in so well with what we're doing with Nina Mendelsohn. In fact, you raved about Nina. Why don't you talk about Nina, and I'll pull up the page. Siobhan.
Which you? Oh, thank you. I was going to ask. Yeah, so the way that I always talk about it is when you have any condition that's disfiguring, like lipedema can be, but also just when you're approaching how you think about your body generally, even if you don't have any disease, nothing is going on, you still have that relationship that needs to be kindled, and not everybody responds the same way. So I never really connected with the positive affirmations or anything like that. It just didn't feel genuine to me. It didn't feel like I was using my own words. And the approach that Nina takes is very different in that she approaches it from using your own language to build this relationship with your body so it can feel much more natural, so that you can... It doesn't have to feel perfect all the time. Like, you can be sarcastic, you can, like any other relationship that you have in your life, you just take it day by day, and mostly you're working towards a healthier space and learning how to tackle issues and really understand what's going on and working together ultimately. And I think that approach is really, really cool. And I'm glad that we're going to be able to introduce this to more people and continue the conversation, because I think just exploring the different tools that are available, not everybody's going to respond to one thing. And sometimes it's helpful to have multiple tools. Maybe sometimes you do affirmations, and on other days you're just not feeling it. So it's like, you know what? I'm just going to go with the body peace map and stick with that for today because it's just going to work better for me.
Mm-hmm. Let me say that Nina introduced me to this mapping process about one's relationship with one's body, from body hatred, which is the place that I feel like I spent most of my life, as hating my body, and into body peace. But it's not a jump. You don't go from hating it to loving it, but is a very gentle and graduate process. And so she's introduced me to states that really have been so kind. I mean, the one thing that I've learned from Nina, I believe, is how to be kind to my body and how to be kind to myself. Mm-hmm. And so she has a space called Body Compassion, which is wonderful, just wonderful. So I'm thrilled. We're doing a free webinar on January 13th, which is Monday at 6 p.m. And we're into simplification this year. So body peace simplified, really understanding it. And I'm happy to say that Nina's going to be sharing a lot of this with you. And I'm going to be encouraging it because we're having a 3-week course later in January and in February, all about embracing our bodies, which is amazing to me. You know,
that's talking my language. That's totally where I'm coming from on that too. I think it just adds so much to our health and our mental health and our emotional health when we can really come into that peace in our bodies. Definitely,
it's so hard. It's so hard. Is the issue? Well, let me reframe that. It's a challenge for some of us. You know, I've been every which way. My weight, but it's what Siobhan said. The thing with lipedema is it's disfiguring. And there's nothing you can do about that. But anyway, oh, good. Thank you, whoever put up the link. I appreciate it.
I did. So the link is in the chat. If you're watching this later and you have any trouble finding it, it's just at our evergreen link. So it's just learn.lipedema-simplified.org/free-webinar. And if you haven't already, you'll just want to make sure to bookmark that in your browser or send it to yourself through a message or whatever, because we routinely update it with new stuff. So set it as your homepage in your browser so you can see what's coming up next.
Hi, Marilee from the Pacific Northwest. It's 50. It is like 50 below here.
It's really cold here in North Carolina too. We have a 3-day watch for winter storms, and we're kind of close to the beach, so it's kind of shocking to me. I've never experienced something like this before.
It is so cold. But I am going to, I want to jump in and just open the conversation because I know Siobhan has some contributions for this. This is a YouTube video, which we found interesting. This is about Lumi. Let me get past Lumi. Okay, here it is. It is coming. Maybe. Huh. It's just twirling.
Yep, while you're pulling that up, Donna said, hello from cold New Hampshire in all caps. And Susie also said, hey ladies, hello. Yeah, and if you're watching, I know we have some people watching with us. Go ahead and leave a comment with where you're at, where you're tuning in from, what the weather's like, what you had for breakfast, whatever you feel like sharing. We always like hearing from people and checking in and seeing the faces pop up. so that we know that you're there.
Yeah, really. We just had a conversation about YouTube and YouTube influencers and social media. And I said, I studied social media. I studied social media years ago when it was just starting, really.
Mm-hmm.
And we were trying to understand where it fit in and how it fit in, but from an old paradigm. It wasn't a new paradigm by any means, which I think is interesting as I see it now. But okay, I am now going to share this, I hope. Here it is. Nope, that's not it. That's not it. This is it. Yeah. um, he calls it the debate around this fat disorder, which is all about lipedema. And he quotes, Dr. Herbst and Dr. Birch and present companies, Linda Ann Kahn, a lot of the people you would recognize. And there is a chapter by chapter. What is lipedema? Then Karen Herbst, standard of care, international consensus, etc. So he goes through a lot of the people that you would recognize their name about lipedema. But I found it interesting because he doesn't have lipedema. He knows someone who has lipedema, but how did he get involved in lipedema? And yeah. So what do you think, Siobhan?
Yeah, so I think he mentions in the video someone that he follows has lipedema, and that's kind of why he started looking into it, is the impression that I got, at least. And he does bring up a lot of really good points throughout the video. So it's a long video. I admittedly watched it on 2x speed, so it only took me like an hour and 45 minutes or something. But he does bring up a lot of really good points that are things that we've discussed in the community as well. Like, there is some caution that needs to be had in terms of, saying that things work or don't work, or saying things with confidence when there needs to be further study done. Understanding what's really happening with the disease. Is there edema? Is there not edema? Is it a different type of edema? And kind of going forward with curiosity, and then talking with other people who disagree on what might be going on with civility and respect, and making sure we're doing our due diligence when we're sharing information with the community. There's also interesting things he brings up as well in terms of, should you approach people if they look like they have lipedema? And this is a question I've seen brought up in the community as well, and it's something we've talked about during webinars and conferences. And my perspective is that I learned I had lipedema because people messaged me privately after they saw some signs in me that seemed like maybe it was a possibility. And that included ankle cuffing and pictures that I had, and losing fat disproportionately during a very long fast, and the disproportion and the shape of my legs and all this stuff. And that didn't bother me. I thought it was just kind of interesting, didn't really know what it was. I ended up getting a formal diagnosis, and I looked into it because they had reached out. But it is a controversial topic because for some people, if you approach them like that, it's going to make them very self-conscious. It could be very upsetting, because essentially what you're saying is that your body looks kind of weird. And so it's not the approach that I take. I've talked about this before. So generally the way that I talk about it is I'll talk about it in general terms, and then also from my perspective, this is the kind of things that I experience. This is what I know about the condition generally. And I'll do that at conferences and stuff too. I've given presentations on lipedema with largely non-lipedema audiences. And if people resonate with the general information, they'll come and talk to me and get more information. And then I can talk about the other symptoms in terms of the painfulness and the heaviness. the nodular feeling in the fat tissue from the scar tissue, and then we can explore a little bit more. And that way, if someone is like, oh man, maybe this is me, but they're not ready to have that discussion yet, or they'd much rather just go directly to their doctor and talk about it, it's much more, it gives them more leeway to make their own decision about how they approach it. So I don't mind that I learned the way that I did. I don't think I would have heard about lipedema for probably many years, if not decades later, if people hadn't told me. And I also understand the other perspective of people have also said, you know, I wish someone would have told me that I look weird, because at least then I would have had access to the information. Right. And so it's a complex topic, but I think it's something we need to talk about. So I appreciate that he brought it up, and all of the other stuff that he brought up in the video. There's a lot of stuff that we do not know about lipedema. We have some hints and we have some initial study and initial investigation, but we don't know everything, and we need to be honest about that. The edema question, for example, is very complex in that we do have subjective reports of swelling, like the heaviness and tightness, the tight and shiny skin. You can feel the sponginess and bogginess of the tissue on palpation, but those aren't definitive. It suggests there might be edema, and we do have some additional imaging that's coming out suggesting, yeah, it seems like there might be something different going on with the lymphatics compared to obesity and lymphedema. There might be these strange lymphatic structures, but we don't fully understand what's going on yet. We do know from the community that a lot of people find relief in terms of that tightness and heaviness and all this other stuff through things like manual lymphatic drainage and compression and aquatic exercises that lend some natural compression. And so we do talk about those things. And we do say we think that there is edema based off of the evidence we have. But me personally, I want more research to be done on this. Like, I want absolute 100% confidence that this is what we're dealing with. Because then, you know, if we understand it is happening and here's why it's happening, that opens up more treatment avenues and we can go forward with a lot more confidence. So very long video and very long commentary from me. But yeah, it got me thinking. That's the thing. It got me thinking, and that is always a good thing. And more discussion from all sides, all perspectives is always a good thing.
And the other part about it is, as I was saying, before we went live, I was saying, well, I have lymphedema. So I have a lymphatic component, even though I have lipedema. So is it me, or is it something more generally a part of the disorder? And then I was thinking, you know, we talk about lymphedema, we talk about lymphatic disorder, we talk about lipedema, we talk about obesity less. There is a component with obesity that is definitely a part of what we deal with. And I feel like, for me personally, that I'm looking in that direction a little more these days.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm glad you brought that up, because I think it was another really great point that when we say things like lipedema tissue does not respond to calorie restriction or exercise, which is the accumulated evidence that we have, that doesn't mean that the person will not respond to weight loss at all. So, and I think that's very important to distinguish, especially just moving forward with your health journey. So there are a lot of things that are associated with obesity and insulin resistance in particular. And we want people to address those things. We want them to be healthy overall. And generally what we find is that when people improve their overall health, their lipedema symptoms also get better, which is always a good thing. And then we have people who are considering surgery. But the thing is that we need to take a look and see, is there also obesity present in that person? Because if so, that does leave them at higher risk of complications, in which case part of their plan going into surgery should be addressing obesity and getting them as healthy as possible, which we have talked about a lot, a lot going into surgery, making sure your metabolic health is as good as possible, abdominal obesity is addressed, all of that stuff.
Yeah, we tend to come in on the side of a holistic approach, which says, take care of the whole person. In fact, that's one of the things that Tamara often talks about what it means to have a whole person approach where you're looking at self-care. Can you share a little bit more about that, Tamara?
Yeah, and I just wanted to go back to a comment y'all were making about how do we share information about this? Because one of my biggest things was having a voice in this and being an advocate and helping to, as a layperson, learn as much as I can as a layperson to be able to share with doctors. But I do love there's like a trifold, I believe, that Lipedema Simplified put out.
Yes.
And I take that with me. I leave it in the car. I have stacks of them. And whenever I'm at a doctor's office, whatever kind of doctor it is, I always ask if they could put some in the ladies' room, or maybe leave them out. Like when we were doing the heart-to-hearts, I went around and asked them to put them up on the lobby walls and have a contact information and then a link for Lipedema Simplified. And many of the ladies that came to my heart-to-heart in-person gathering, we had 2 or 3 of them that did see that and came, but also they came with a curiosity. This might be me, right? And so I want to encourage people to print out that. I think there's a link that you can go to. I don't know if it's through the project or through Lipedema Simplified, but it's a great brochure that offers information. And then there's another part of it that you can share with your doctors. And it speaks their language because it's doctors to doctors, clinicians to clinicians. So I think that's really a great one. When I was in physical therapy, I'm still going to physical therapy, but I saw this lady who was really struggling and, larger, and she looked, her legs, like she looked like us. And we were there were just a few of us in the physical therapy office. And on the way out, I did invite her to come. I introduced myself and I said, that I know this feels kind of weird, but I feel like you look like me, and we were right there together, one-on-one. And I had invited her to come to my event and she didn't, but I just wanted her to know that, we appreciate each other and support each other. And I think there is a way that, I wouldn't walk along the street. I mean, sometimes when I'm out with my husband, we'll be like, oh, that lady has lipedema, and not should sound like we're making fun of or anything, but you notice it more when you're more aware of what it is. And how I wish to reach out to those people. I'm not comfortable with doing that, but one-on-one, when you see someone, and then sharing it with the doctors, just asking them to leave it in the ladies' room. And I've gone into my orthopedic doctor and I still see them, sitting there in the lobby, and I refresh them, too. So, and then there's different doctors' offices too that, like my vein doctors, they have liaisons that come and they will help you. You can help them connect with the doctors in your area, and they'll come and teach on various kinds of vascular problems, make sure that they know about lipedema as well. So, that's one of those things I think is really helpful to get the word out about, what this is and what this looks like and what it feels like. I know I've been several times that I saw a video where Siobhan was talking about the blood pressure cuff, and that was the first time. And I had somebody say to me, one of my friends, she said, I think I have lipedema. And I was like, oh, that I kind of remember that. And that's what got me looking into it, because I always thought everybody had intense pain, with the blood pressure cuff, and it was just a really big aha for me. So even those little things, you know, getting that kind of information out is really, really beneficial, you know.
Yeah, and that's the thing, is there's not one thing that can say, oh, that person absolutely has lipedema. But even visually, I mean, we talked about this in our paper, there are signs that are distinct. So the disproportion, not only in the hips and thighs, but if there's ankle cuffing, then that is a big one where you have to start asking questions, because cuffing does not happen in a lot of conditions. I have searched and searched and searched for when this happens, because if we can identify those, oh, wait a minute, this is happening in that person, this is a trigger question where we should look into this further. And like cuffing can look very similar in lymphedema, but then typically the feet are also involved. So if you have someone with cuffing without feet involvement, then for doctors especially, that's a big one where they can look at it and say, okay, we need to look further into this. But even then, it's not, they definitely have lipedema. It could be they look like they might have lipedema. Maybe they want to look further into it. But it's not just like someone's body shape. The cuffing in particular is very distinctive. And then there are additional symptoms beyond that that kind of helps narrow it down. So when I've talked to doctors, one thing that they've said is they really like these trigger questions, especially if they go through really fast appointments because of how the practice is set up. So if they know, if someone comes in, I measure their waist size or have them measure it or whatever, it's normal, but their lower body looks disproportionately big, and potentially they have this cuffing. And then I know to ask this question about pain and this question about heaviness and so on and so on. It's very, very helpful for them. Yeah. So often that's what we're talking about, is these trigger questions of, we can look at someone and see some of these really distinctive signs and say, okay, that might be what that is, because that clustering does not happen in a lot of other conditions.
Right. And even with my physical therapist, you know, when I go in for evaluations, they'll want to take my blood pressure, and I'll say, you know, can you take it here? And then educating them about that. And then aha comes on for him, and he's like, oh, I didn't know that was part of that, you know, so being able to mention it, you know. And I don't have the ankle cuffing. My legs and knees have the big bubbles, the real fibrous, bubbly kind of stuff. And then my calf is, I mean, it's larger, but I don't have the cuffing at the bottom. Mine is a different type. So I do love that there's the visual. There's something that Lipedema Simplified puts out that also has the visual of the different types, you know, for the ladies. But then I did notice, as I was, you know, I get real puffy right here, and then it seems like my arm, I don't know, is that a thing, like arm puffing? I don't know.
Yes. Yeah. So generally we see those reports of, that's one of those like subjective signs of swelling, is that puffiness, the kind of tightness you might feel in your arm, the heaviness you might feel in your arm. And that's the thing with lipedema too, is that not everybody looks the same. So not everybody has cuffing, because the cuffing happens dependent on where the tissue is and how severe that accumulation is. So if someone has it from hip to knee, they're not going to have ankle cuffing because they don't have the tissue down to that point. Or if they have it shoulder to wrist like I do, they may have wrist cuffing as well. And if they have lipedema tissue in their arms, they may notice that they're also swelling in their arms, or they feel that tightness and heaviness, which might suggest swelling.
And even blow drying my hair sometimes, you know, I just feel like, oh, my arms, you know, they're so sore.
Yeah, and that muscle fatigue that can happen, and it just feels like there's concrete in your arms. And luckily, even though we just talked about, we don't know precisely what's happening, but we do know that when people use things like compression, or someone in the chat mentioned that they go swimming 5 days a week, that does seem to help with those symptoms. And for one, that gives some possible idea of what might be happening. but also that there are things we can do about it, which is a big thing.
But I think sometimes it's the recognition that something exists that gives us the impetus to continue.
Well, there's freedom in that. I felt so relieved when I had the first time I had a doctor tell me it wasn't my fault after I'm 65, you know, and I was just diagnosed with it a year ago. So I cried the whole way home because I was like, this isn't my fault. And yeah, we still have the responsibility to do the best we can. Absolutely. But, you know, in your spirit, just to have somebody to recognize that, you know, it's not your fault. It's, and that's the world, you know, that's society and culture telling you because you're, you know, a little overweight or whatever, you know, that there's something wrong with you. But then having that realization, that was huge. It was huge.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like having dealt with both obesity and lipedema, I still see a lot of overlap there because there's more and more recognition that obesity is a metabolic disorder. And sure, like discussions over is calorie restriction necessary or can you go on diets that address the hormonal component, all of that stuff aside, when you start to understand why something is happening and you can start investigating the tools that you can use for lipedema and obesity both, it becomes less a moral flaw in your character and more like I didn't even understand what I was dealing with or the tools that work. And with obesity too, there's more and more talk about holistic approaches for it. So not just addressing how much food you're eating, but what is the quality of the food you're eating? What is your overall health like? What is your stress response? Do you have healthy coping mechanisms? Do you find yourself emotionally eating? It's this whole huge topic. And it is really nice because obesity and lipedema often go together in a lot of people. And obesity may result in worsening lipedema symptoms for any number of reasons. I could list many possibilities there. But these two things going together means that when you're working on one, the other one might also be helped. And then it's like a positive feedback in exactly the way that we want.
Yeah. What about hearing about my MLD? Because I have lymphedema as well and bad circulation in my veins. And so he calls it lipolymphedema. Yeah.
Yeah. So there's been debate over that. And I think it's a good question to ask because it's unclear if the lipedema may cause lymphedema, or it could also be that lipedema is coming along with fat gain, and we already know that obesity can result in lymphedema. So, and then added complexity is that lipedema often comes with obesity. So maybe where lymphedema is developing, it's because there's co-occurring obesity, and we don't know. Like, I think that's plausible. I don't know. I mean, it'd be interesting to see if lymphedema develops if obesity is not present in the person. I think that would help clarify that. But we don't know. But we do know it's a common comorbidity. And that means talking about what are the signs of this, what should people look out for, and then understanding for a lot of people that lymphedema care is going to be part of their lipedema care because you can't address one without addressing the other. That's not going to lead to a healthy person. And again, that's not to say, you know, even if it is that it's coming from the excess tissue accumulation and that impacting the lymphatics, all that, that still does not mean that it is the person's fault that that happened. Like, you can't prevent something that you don't even realize is going on. And with lipedema, I think it is more complex because we have pictures of people who are getting lipedema surgeries and all of this stuff. So we know what the insides look like. It's in the standard of care paper. We do understand through histology as well, so looking at the composition of the tissue, that there is fibrosis and scarring. And So in terms of the lipedema tissue expanding, one thing that might also be happening is that scar tissue is accumulating. And then when you try to lose weight from that, you might have a really difficult time getting that back off. And scar tissue is built to last.
Mm-hmm.
And so then we get into this kind of really annoying and frustrating aspect where you may gain weight, lose some of that weight, but the lipedema tissue has progressed, including that scar tissue. And then if you go through cycles of that over and over again, then that could be expanding, and potentially that may contribute to the risk of lymphedema. Even if you resolve the obesity, you have this cycle of accumulation and having trouble getting it off. So I think that's something that a lot of people don't understand, or even like, how could that be possible that you could not lose fat from this one area? Well, we have a really good idea. It might be because of that scar tissue. So
that makes sense.
That's important to understand.
I was looking at Sue's comment. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, we seem to be expanding. We're way over our 20 minutes.
Oh,
we're now almost at 40 minutes. So I would like to say, keep coming back. I think what happens is we trigger these thoughts in one another, and we end up going into these wonderful explorations, which we will continue to do.
Yes, and I just want to respond to one comment because it's a very quick response, and then we'll close out.
Yeah.
But Susie said that she received the leg compression kit last week. It seems to have kicked off my restless leg syndrome. So one thing I will note is that a common cause of restless legs is magnesium deficiency. So when you're moving fluid out of a tissue, you are also moving the electrolytes out of that tissue. So talk to your doctor first, make sure magnesium supplementation or like an Epsom salt bath or something will work for you, but that might be a quick fix. I've also heard from some people that CBD can help with that. But again, talk to your doctor, make sure there's no contraindications or conflict with medicine or anything. But those are two ideas.
And Tamara, why don't you take us out?
And for the ending?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I always like to say, remember that you are loved and you are valued and you are treasured. We hope to see you again.
That's a nice way to go into that.
Have a nice weekend, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.